All right, and our meeting is going to be recorded this morning. So see, that's been done for us. Thank you, Brittany. That's okay. I'm seeing technical difficulties with webcam. Don't have a camera. That's okay. Again, that's part of what we're going to talk about this morning. It's all part of the process, right? Let me go ahead and share. And since I did that, I won't be able to see the chat feature while we're talking. But at the end, I'm going to go ahead and close out. And we'll have time for a question, answer, feedback period. All right. I'm seeing a thumbs up like that. An added feature to WebEx, right? Yes, thank you. Fabulous. A way to be able to express ourselves, right? That's one of the caveats about all this technology. So we'll go ahead and get started. So ironically, on today's WebEx, we'll talk about being WebExed out, right? So basically, video chat fatigue is what we'll talk about, and couple that with mental health. So as many of you do know, I am a therapist in hiding of sorts. I am licensed as both a marriage and family therapist and a professional counselor. But I do serve here at the college as the director of grants administration. So we'll just start off with a bit of a funny, right? So this is something that happened right in the beginning whenever most of the country went into lockdown. I'm sure some of you saw this floating around. There was an instance where a boss turned herself into a potato for a Teams meeting, and she didn't know how to get out of it. So she had to go through the entire meeting, sitting there as a potato. And one of the things that have really come to light through the remote working, most of the stay-at-home orders across the country increased the amount of remote working that happened for many companies. There's also an increase in customer demand for online services. In our case, online classes for our students, student services going online to be able to serve our students as well. And then for us internally to be able to have our operations go online as well. So there was also increase in technology. So although we had at our fingertips Teams and SharePoint before, it really came to the forefront for us here at the college to be able to use these technologies in addition to WebEx. And then also there's been an increase in migration of assets to the cloud. And fortunately for us, SLCC's IT team was already in that process. And so even happened over the break. If you've noticed, all of your files have now gone to OneDrive. And so lots of technological advances. And in fact, as I was reading through this article, it fast forwarded for many companies about 6 years worth of work in about 2 months span of time, their technology upgrades that they had planned. So Zoom fatigue. So how, the attention span, we always talk about attention spans being fairly short. So how much are you actually paying attention, right, during these Zoom meetings? According to this graph, about 2%, because you have all of these other things going on. So there's lots of distractions, and I know that you guys have encountered them, probably even this morning, right? Your screen freezes, there's weird echoes going on in the background, you have a dozen heads staring at you, you're kind of Brady Bunch-esque looking. There are work huddles, there are one-on-one meetings, then after that you may be doing Zoom time with family, and so it's just this never-ending bit of being on screen. So it takes a lot of energy to be involved in these chats, more so than just being in a meeting room with other people. So you have to work harder to process nonverbal cues because of the glitches that we tend to encounter, low bandwidth, all of those pieces. Silence often increases anxiety. So you don't know if it's a technology glitch or if somebody just didn't hear you. In fact, there's even delays of 1.2 seconds make people receive the responder as less friendly or focused. So perhaps by no fault of your own, just through a technology glitch, somebody may perceive you as not being as engaged. We also feel the need to perform since we're on camera, right? You're aware that you're being watched and you can see yourself watching yourself and watching others. So you typically have more attention drawn to that than actually paying attention to what's being said or what's going on in the meeting. I think my favorite on this chart is the removal of cat from keyboard. I mean, how many of you guys have seen coworkers' pets, right, entering into the frame? Absolutely. You really get to see a different side of someone whenever you have a glimpse into their home, right? So in addition to all of these factors just happening on the call itself, there's everything else that's going on in your life, all the other extraneous factors. So getting on calls is a reminder of, so you see right here, loneliness and collaboration. These are things that we struggle with in being in a strictly virtual format. And one of the things is getting on these calls, as I said right whenever we joined in the beginning, like I miss seeing you guys. You don't see everybody and the interactions are very different. There's much more isolation coming into the fold. And also too, everything's happening in the same space. Your personal life, your business life, your leisure time, everything is happening. So there's less separation to be able to have your different selves in these different places. And also just a lack of downtime because everything else is starting to overlap with each other. And so the CDC put out some of these mental health statistics. And as you can see, in a year span of time, compared to June of last year to June 2019 to June 2020, both anxiety and depression increased threefold. And so that was right in the height of kind of the stay-at-home order. Everything kind of came to fruition in March. Lockdown happened in April. And then April, May, June, we're really in those beginning phases and not really, there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety around what is this, what's going on. And so there's also been lots of increase in anxiety and depression surrounding just the death toll, the sickness, and also to the mitigation activities. Just being able to being home, following physical distancing, social distancing, and the mask mandates and all of those pieces that go along with that. And then so also you could see from January 2020 to September, so in a matter of 9 months, the screening for anxiety had doubled, and screening for depression also nearly doubled as well. So I'm sure that you guys are very familiar with burnout and signs of burnout. So burnout's a reaction to the compound of stress whenever things are just continuing to happen on top of each other. So here are some common symptoms. They usually include exhaustion, grief, cynicism, reduced creativity, and various physical symptoms. But there's also emotional, behavioral, interpersonal, spiritual signs of burnout. And so just like self-care activities, signs of burnout can be very individualized. So of primary importance is to recognize when you are not feeling yourself. So the surface symptoms are usually only signs of a deeper trigger. So when you recognize something is just not right, dig deeper and really pull back those layers to find the underlying issue that's really going on for you. So for example, although there's a dirty sock line in the middle of the floor and it may have sent you into this angry tirade, the pure exhaustion of answering emails, fixing snacks, worrying about the mask mandates is probably the real source of your stress response, not really the sock laying on the floor, right? So again, it's all of those things that have coupled on top of each other. So emotions are absolutely real, absolutely. So give yourself permission to feel those feelings. I love this right here. And also because it's, in the context of a therapy session. So, and what do we feel? What do we do when we feel like this? And so the person, changes Zoom background. Therapists know, right? So that's an avoidance tactic, to be able to just change something physical in the surroundings. So it's really important that you hone in on those feelings. And we are all experiencing a wide array of emotions. So it's completely normal that we feel out of sorts, that we feel crazy, right? So these feelings may also be more intense given the sudden nature of the changes and the constant uncertainty, especially back in March. I mean, we're all here on Friday. We started hearing the news of what was going on. And then Friday, and then on Monday, we all had a little bit of time to be able to come in, pack up our things, and head home for a month or two. And again, the uncertainty of, well, how long is this going to last? Initially we thought maybe it'll last about a month. We're almost coming up on a year. I saw a meme over the weekend that said something about coming up on a quarantine anniversary. And it'll be here around the corner before we know it. So these are tough times, and it's perfectly acceptable to acknowledge that these times are indeed tough. I know my team has heard from me a bunch. Sometimes it just sucks, and it's okay to acknowledge it. And then we're able to move from there, because if we don't acknowledge it, it'll just sit there, and we know something's not right, but we just have to be able to acknowledge it to deal with it, to then move forward with that. So setting boundaries is incredibly important. As you can see here, we have the meeting view zone. Everything looks really great on this side, but on the other, it is a hot mess. And that's okay, because most of us are working in really tight quarters. We might be working at the kitchen table in your home with everything else still going on around you. So it's important to set both emotional and physical boundaries that make sense, but most importantly, communicate those to others. So through these rules of engagement, you're telling others how best to interact with you. So setting expectations on the front end can ultimately reduce miscommunication. Identifying physical boundaries in the home may be necessary as well, since we are spending more time in these close quarters. So there were some things, that I've seen over the course of the months. Like somebody may have to take a meeting. You may have several people in the home working from home. So you may have to lock yourself in a room for a meeting and just put a sign on the front door saying, I need an hour, in a meeting, in an hour. Snacks are on the countertop, right? So this was a tip that I found along the way, to actually use a virtual background to preserve the privacy of your home. I've been using it to kind of hide the clutter of, my entryway, but I thought it was really neat. Some people are very private and they don't want to turn on their cameras because they simply just don't want people kind of intruding on their home. So I thought that was really neat to be able to put up a background to where you can protect that privacy and to protect yourself. I know in the beginning, we didn't have that feature with WebEx, but now we do. And I see several of you guys are using them as well. And so, think about those pieces that make sense for you. Self-care is absolutely important. And I know that term floats around a whole lot. Oftentimes, when we think of self-care, think bubble baths and massages. Absolutely, that could be something, but more importantly is what is meaningful for you. Even if it's 30 minutes 30 seconds to chew on a piece of chocolate and just immerse yourself in the taste for 30 seconds. That's not a whole lot of time, but it's about focusing and giving yourself permission to take that small break that you need. So prevention and early intervention are key. So I like this one too, because it has a therapist piece in it. So my therapist told me the way to achieve true inner peace is to finish what I start. So for today, I finished 2 bags of M&Ms and a chocolate cake. I feel better already. Right? So again, it's personalized. It's what's going to make sense for you. So be realistic about self-care. While there are lists identifying lots of techniques, these practices in finding relief should be personalized. Be intentional to engage in activities that are meaningful to you. So develop coping skills that help you to preserve a sense of control. Take small steps towards achievement. If you would like to take a 10-minute walk around the block, maybe start with 5 minutes to work your way up. If that's too long, start with 2 minutes, start with 1 minute. Whatever it is that makes the most sense for you, that's realistic and achievable. You'll feel a sense of accomplishment by reaching your ultimate goal whenever you take those small steps. Think about babies, right? They don't come out the womb running, right? They start by army crawling, first rolling over, army crawling, then eventually taking wobbly steps, then eventually they're able to walk. So same concept, right? Those little steps are what really is important. And most importantly, just have compassion for yourself and give yourself permission to do what is necessary. And then again, communicating that very clearly to others. We have a tendency to make assumptions that if we're cut off or if we're silent, that people are going to understand to just leave us alone. They may not. We have to be able to communicate that very clearly and in a way that just sets expectations, right? So again, we're defining for people how to communicate with us. If we don't tell them, they don't know. So responding to stress, right? So take a proactive stance in responding. Anxiety increases when we are in a constant reactionary state. So know your triggers. If you know that tingle in your toe that's your breaking point. Know those things about yourself and use your experiences to leverage your response. So if you know that you have a report coming up that is going to cause you anxiety, but you've worked through it before, do those same things that you've done before that work to help get you through your task and your day. Have a few go-to techniques that you can automatically apply when you recognize yourself moving towards stress and burnout. So seek support. Go to, your trusted family, friends, and colleagues. Go to somebody who's going to listen to you and validate. Oftentimes, we don't want somebody to fix our problems or to tell us what to do. Oftentimes we just want to vent and want to be able to talk through what's going on with us, just get some things off of our chest, and somebody to just validate that these things are normal, these times are normal. Even though we're constantly in this new normal, having the emotions as we have them is something that's normal in our everyday lives. Seek out support groups, and that could be through any kind of support group. There are lots of Facebook groups, there are health groups, there are mental health groups. It could be, taking your dog to the dog park and meeting up with the group there. There's so many supports that are available, social supports. There are national, regional, state, and local resources that are available. There's so much that's out there, from reading articles to phone numbers to connecting with others, engaging in counseling if that's helpful for you. Something else that's arisen out of being home and isolation, that suicidal ideation has gone up as well. So I've listed here the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. And then also, as an employee, we receive a free benefit through the Employee Assistance Program. So Elise has sent out numerous emails. I've been so happy to see her send those out. So here I've listed both the number and the website. That could be helpful. There are lots of resources available. Just know that we are all struggling differently, but all struggling, and know that that is normal to struggle. It's okay to struggle. It is our human essence for us to struggle in these ways, but there is help and assistance out there and lots of resources. So I just wanted to, So speaking of technical difficulties, right? You guys hang tight with me. There we go. All right. So I just wanted to wrap back around to the video chat fatigue, right? So if you can, try to limit the amount of video calls to those that are necessary. It kind of goes back to the same concept of just meetings in general. I think this just kind of heightens it and brings it to the top. Could this have been done in an email or a phone call? Have your screen off to the side instead of straight ahead. So it may seem like that you're, just kind of a part of the meeting, and that you don't feel so inclined to that everybody's looking at you, right? Shared files, having shared files with clear notes. So being able to use Teams and SharePoint. And I know that IT is starting to make even more of a transition with the channels. So being able to have a little bit more individualized, concentrated, focused conversations on pieces. So I think ultimately just being able to use the resources, the technical resources that we have in a more efficient way. But there's a learning curve there, right? And that's perfectly normal and all part of it. So also have time for well-being check-ins before beginning a meeting. And this is probably happening organically for many of you, and everybody's jumping on a call, or as we're kind of waiting for people to jump on calls, just, checking in with everybody. How are you? What's going on? How's the dog? How's the cat? That we saw last time. Just those organic conversations that happen that we just typically are able to, kind of like hallway chats, right? To me, this takes the place of hallway chats whenever we're just meeting up with each other. And then also, very important, build in time for transition between video meetings. Thought we did a great job of that today, having those 15-minute increments between sessions. Think about it, again, kind of the same thing as if you were having meetings on campus, you would have time for travel time, right? You wouldn't have meetings necessarily back to back. You also need to be able to have time to change from one topic to the next, right? And then again, so with that, those boundaries and transitions are very important. So think of them as buffers, right? Again, protecting yourself and your time, your emotions, your energy, all of those pieces. So I did want to leave a little bit of time at the end. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that I can see the chat. I've seen it kind of popping up. But I just wanted to give us some time to be able to just kind of talk through these experiences. What are you guys experiencing, to just kind of validate and normalize what we're going through. Anything, any kind of tips and tricks that are working for you that you'd like to be able to share with the group. So open the floor, so you can go ahead and take yourself off mute if you'd like to chime in.
Well, I'll share. I'm Shade Nelson. Thank you, Dr. Baudoin, for this awesome presentation. I shared in the chat that when the stay-at-home order began, I was at home, here working, and had my two little ones, 6 and 2-year-olds, and like I had Zoom meetings back to back with my team, and I had the 2-year-old screaming in the background, and eventually I was like, you know what? Look, here are my 2 kids. They're in the camera. They're my personal assistants during this time. And they just became really like a part of my work life, because that was the only way that I could really maintain my sanity. So it was a crazy time, but in the beginning I was embarrassed, because I'm like, okay, this is like not how this is supposed to work. But then I was like, you know what? It is what it is. I'm a mommy and also a leader, and I'm just gonna have to figure out that balance. So here are my kiddos, and yeah, they're gonna be a part of this operation. And it worked out, but I definitely had major anxiety about that, but I got over it. So just my personal story and how I dealt with that and making that transition. So yeah, my personal assistants are now back at there in school. So I'm all good.
Yes, no, thank you so much for mentioning that. And I mean, you guys are living this, so I mean, I could talk about this topic for hours and hours and hours, but again, we're WebExed out. And so I didn't want this to be me just spewing information to you that you already kind of know about. Just wanted to really normalize what it is that we're going on. But you are absolutely right. It's more than just it's more than just doing our work remotely. It's in the context of everything else, and not only what's going on in our homes, but what's going on in our country as well. I would be amiss if I didn't mention that as well. There's just so much that's going on that we're all having to mitigate and work through. So yes, I'm enjoying your chat comments as well.
Yeah. Hi, this is Nancy. So a little trick I'm trying to kind of remind myself to do is to get up and walk around, or do some stretching, because
Yes.
The thing about the WebEx is, compared to when you're in the office, you're not going to the printer, you're not walking down the hallway, and you're sitting in front of that computer for 8-9 hours a day. And after a while, I think it really starts to take a toll on you physically, between your neck and your back. And so I'm trying to, again, remember to kind of get up, because it's making me feel just to be just sitting for so long. And I didn't know if anybody else was having those issues, that I just can't bear to be sitting anymore. So
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Nancy. You are absolutely right. We're a bit more stationary potentially.
Nancy, you're not alone. This is Dr. Thomas. You're not alone. I actually have made an effort to take a smoke break, and I don't even smoke. But I'm taking smoke breaks now, because sitting here so many hours in front of the screen, multiple calls, is draining. And it is taxing on your body as well.
Absolutely.
I tried to last semester and the semester before that, when we had to break for COVID and come straight home. I tried to look on the positive side, and my office is off of the kitchen. So when I had 15 minutes between classes, I had time to throw a roast into the slow cooker. And that's something I could never do at work. I'd have to wake up at like 4 o'clock in the morning to get dinner ready for that night. But you can grab whatever time you have and, just think of go outside and take a walk. I get my dogs insisted on walks at noon and 3 in the afternoon, and I was never home to do that before. And they were only like 5 or 10 minute walks, but they got them out and stretching their legs, and it got me out stretching my legs. So, and just being able to get out and get some fresh air, because I couldn't do that when we were working on campus too much. So just try to think of the positive side of it, and don't let yourself sit in your chair for 10-hour days, because that's going to kill your butt, and it's going to kill your back, and it's going to kill your brain, I think. Anyway,
Absolutely.
all I have.
Yes. No, thank you, Anne, for sharing.
Everybody may think this is old school, and I kind of actually went back to it, is the stress balls. It's a way to silently release stress. I mean, at some point the last couple of years, you get them at a conference and you just leave them in a bag or on your desk, but actually it's been helping me to silently release some stress when I can't actually get up for a bit. So that has helped too.
I've got to say that I don't like working from home. Like Erin, the lines get really blurry. I need a distinct separation from work and home life. And when I was at home, I was so glad to come back to my office because one, all my stuff was here and I could work easier. And
Right.
two, at home, like Nancy said, sitting in front of the computer all day, when I'd have to get up and leave to just go to the restroom or do whatever, I felt kind of guilty because I thought I was going to miss something. A call would come in or an email or whatever, and I'd miss that. And I wanted to make sure I was dedicating the time that was for work. So, yeah, I get what everyone's saying, but I'm amazed at the creativity of everybody and how they figure out the workarounds, how they come up with solutions, working late at night or getting together with somebody else and talking it through. And it's just, we really have an amazing group of people here that is so diverse, and everybody brings something to the table. We're all able to learn something from each other, even if it's just a crazy joke that helps us chuckle through the day, So I'm grateful for the group that we have. It's been a stressful time, but I'm glad that we're all working through it together, So,
Yes, thank you so much for sharing, Helen. And exactly, that's my point, right? Finding that support with each other. Although our perspective, of our experiences are each different, we are going through something similar, right, in the context. And so it's really important to be able to lean on each other in these times. And you're right, in the creativity. And not everybody's experiencing it the same. Some people hate working from home. Some people love it. Some people, it's a mix. I feel you on, I miss having my 2 screens, right? It's a luxury that, you don't realize you have until you don't have it. And one of those, caveat, you don't know what you have till it's gone. But yes, and so my point in today, and yes, there are benefits, but I also want to acknowledge that it is tough, and it's okay to say that it's tough while having the benefits as well. It's okay for it to be both and.
And if I could just share from a nursing perspective.
Yes, please.
Please remember to drink and hydrate.
Yes.
Because we sit so long, we get involved, we actually forget to actually drink. And I guess as we working together and your families are noticing what you are doing, I got a Christmas gift unexpectedly in the mail. Was a smart bottle my godchild sent me. It actually lights up. It sent me signals and comments to remind me to drink. It said, don't hate, hydrate. It's time for a drink or something, and so I guess you realize, we were talking, like, I'm at the computer again, and so she's sitting. It was a beautiful gift. I appreciate it. And I also got another gift. I guess they were watching me. You never know who's watching. My kids gave me something to track. And I realized tracking my steps, when I go to work, I make 2,000 more steps than when I work from home. So just be mindful of that, to take your breaks and walk. I'm like, okay, so that's where all the pounds came from. So just take care of your health. That's all.
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you for that. Absolutely. You know, it's mental and physical. And oftentimes, and that's why there's unfortunately still such a huge stigma surrounding mental health and seeking help. Fortunately, there have been lots of advocacy efforts. I mean, there's been long-term advocacy efforts, but particularly with this pandemic and everybody feeling a little bit of something, you know, has really heightened the awareness in those advocacy efforts, especially on a national level. And so, you know, oftentimes, you know, when we have an ache or a pain, it's easy to be able to go into the doctor and say, hey, this is wrong. It's a little bit tougher whenever we know we just don't feel right, but not quite sure what's going on with that. So, you know, the mental health part is a little bit tougher to pinpoint. Often it arises in physical symptoms, which leads us to, you know, our physicians. And so oftentimes you may start at a general practitioner's office with a physical symptom that'll often lead maybe to a referral outside for mental health counseling or support groups or something, if it's something that, you know, is symptomatic.
I'll share something. I started in March, the week before we went on lockdown, so to speak. I started on the 10th. By Friday the 13th, we were like, don't go in other people's offices, don't shake hands, stay where you are. Monday, we didn't have, you know, work. Tuesday was like, come to your office, get everything you need. I didn't even have everything I need because I hadn't really done onboarding. And then when I'm at home, my mom works at the office, so I'm literally at home by myself. I don't have siblings. I don't have a pet. I don't have kids. So it's like, cool, what do I do now?
Right.
I'm literally just here by myself. I don't really know my team. How do I get to know them? So I did start to set up, I've only done it like 1 or 2 times, but set up one-on-one calls with each team member to say like, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you like to do? What do you feel like you contribute to the team? What's your family like? That kind of stuff. And that still continues with some people who really, you know, enjoy that. And maybe it's just a 5 or 10 minute phone call. Because for me, like, how was I going to get to know my team? My experience working right now has pretty much been remote. And when I am at the office, it's like, well, I'm the only one there, or maybe 1 or 2 other people. But since I am at home, like I said, by myself, I have I sit in the dining room. It faces a window, and out the window there's a pond. And sometimes there are little animals, so I may like see how many little egrets can I find, how many birds can I see, or go sit out in the rocking chair. I also now know exactly what time the mail comes every day. So that's an excuse to get up and walk. Just get up and go outside. Like, oh, I hear the truck. I can get up and go outside. And if there are any neighbors out, maybe have 5 or 10 minute conversation with them before going back in to finish up the last part of the day. So those are some things that I've found helpful as someone who, I don't have a cat on a keyboard or a little dog in the background or a cheetah. It's just me entertaining myself all day.
Yes, thank you for sharing, Kaylin. And so, yes, you are all up in the isolation piece of it, right? And you bring up another great point in that, kind of going back to what Helen talked about of being able to lean on support for the team. So for many of us, we've developed really good relationships with our team members. And so it was kind of easier of sorts, in context, right, relative, to be able to move remote and still continue our work. But for people like you who started right at the beginning or who were brought on in the midst of this remote work, which is something that we're not familiar with, it can be really tough to be able to develop those relationships and to build the momentum to get the work done that we need to get done. And so that's another piece of why there's such a huge feeling of isolation for some people, because they don't have those existing relationships. That's a great point. And like you, I didn't realize how much traffic passed in front of my house. I think it's a busy street. What else? What are some oddities that you guys have noticed being home that you wouldn't have otherwise known about?
Hey, Jess, this is Christine.
Yes, ma'am.
So I live here at our house. We live with my dad. So we're Donovan and I and our family. We live in the house I grew up in, my parents' house. What I've noticed by being home, working remotely from home, is that lots of people still call the landline phone. I thought people all called cell phones these days, but that landline phone rings all day long. All day long.
An oldie but goodie.
Yes.
That's incredible.
When we went remote in March, this is Shawn Reynolds from the cosmetology department. I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. So we moved to Lake Charles and lived with my parents so that they could help me with my kids, because I'm teaching how to cut hair all day. So I couldn't multitask. I guess I could have multitask with my 7-year-old and teach her homeschool while she was virtual and teach my class. And I definitely learned that the older my parents are getting, they no longer have a filter in front of their children that are adults. I'm like, when did y'all start talking like that? Oh my gosh. I felt like the COVID was such a blessing for me because I got to go home and spend time with my family and have my kids at home all day, and my kids got to bond with my parents for 8 weeks. It was so awesome. So we were really grateful for that.
Yes, thank you, Shawn, for sharing. And that too, whenever you said Lake Charles, it reminded me, I mean, you guys, we had 2-3 hurricanes in the midst of this as well. A lot.
And it still looks like a war zone there. It's really, every time I go home, it's definitely depressing. It's like, I think the people that are living there are so desensitized because they see it every day. And I'm like, every time when you get to Iowa, it's like, oh my gosh, like their kids are not going to school. They don't have a school, or it's COVID. They're living in campers. It's crazy. It makes me feel very blessed.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Anybody else? Last call.
Sorry. I think I'm going to feedback too much, guys. Sorry. Okay, sorry about that, guys. One thing I noticed, my neighbor next door, their youngest daughter was actually an ECA graduate. So they did the drive-by graduation. I heard a bunch of honking and I'm like, what's going on? And I looked outside and it was kind of bittersweet. Like, I was happy that, she was getting her accolades and able to celebrate that, but it just really reminded me of how COVID has affected our environment, that we've had to shift to, drive-by graduations, drive-by birthdays. Another neighbor across the street, their little 6-year-old boy, drive-by birthday party. So that just really put things into perspective for me as far as like how COVID has changed our lives.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Tori. Definitely brings a whole new meaning to pivot, right? So I want to thank all of you for, again, being flexible in coming to my session on the second piece instead of the first. I'll call it our session, right? Because it's all of us who are going through all of this. So I thank you so much for your time and leave you with this last bit. Please take care of yourself, and whatever that looks like for you, draw those boundaries, make that clear to other people so that they know what your boundaries are. It's absolutely okay to draw them. Just let people know what they are. And I wish you all well and see you when I see you. All right, y'all take care.